What is up, everyone? Welcome to the Mindful Muscle podcast. We got another book review for you on this Tuesday, March 29th. We got Jake Parker in the house. Jake, how's it going?
Great, Paul. I'm happy to be here. Happy to review another awesome book. I love this book.
Yeah, The One Thing by Gary Keller with Jay Papasan. Hope I'm saying that right. I was talking about this just book review that I've been doing with a buddy yesterday. And he's like, yeah, I follow your YouTube channel. I see all these books that you've been putting out. This is amazing. This is so good. And I was like, wow, not only is someone watching this on YouTube, but my friends are watching this. And
Yeah.
sometimes I've done hundreds of podcasts, and for him to say that book, I think he was talking about Atomic Habits last week, the call that we did. And he said that he was watching it. He's a big YouTube person. And so we've got this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. But if you want to watch us and get our hands and facial recognition and consume that content in video format on YouTube, we've got that there as well. All the book reviews, all the Q&As are there. So definitely check that out. And then there's 700 other videos that are training, nutrition, recovery, and mindfulness related that you can get access to as well. Didn't think I was going to plug that, but we just went that direction. So let's dive into The One Thing, the surprisingly simple truth behind extraordinary results. I completed this back when COVID was at its peak. I was looking for books and had a bunch of books that I had plenty of time to kill. So I read this on 4/20/2020. Listen time, if you do this on Audible, 528 pages. It's 240. It was released a while ago, 4/1/2013. So we're coming up on the 9-year anniversary of that. And I'm a fanboy of this book. So readability, 10 out of 10. Rating, 10 out of 10 for me. It's going to be hard for me to not talk about this book for 2 hours and just read it to you, almost like it's the library in sixth grade. But Jake, what were your initial thoughts in terms of readability and rating?
Yeah, so I revisited this book this week. I first read it back in 2019. I want to say like late 2019. Readability, again, it's kind of like Atomic Habits in the sense that there's a lot of visual stuff. It's really easy to read. Chapters are pretty succinct. Readability, 9.5 out of 10. I rate it 8.5 out of 10. I really like this book too. There's so much to dive into, so I'm excited to kind of go into like our big overall takeaways, but it's definitely one of those books that you can keep coming back to and you can learn something new from every time.
Yeah, I took a pen this last weekend and I was going to go through the book and take all of these notes. And what I love about this book is that it underlines everything that you need to remember. And all of the quotes are in red. And whoever designed this is a wizard designer. But you've got the quotes. That's not going to work in the video, but you've basically got the quotes laid out for you. You've got the things that are worth underline, and they do a really good job with photos and visuals. And so I think it's just a combination of when you've got really good content. They obviously had a really good team behind it. But
I like the big ideas at the end of the chapter too.
Yeah, there's so many good things that you could even take away with documents that you're writing or how we're pulling things together. But the overall summary for this is that you want less distractions and things on your plate. You want more productivity, income, satisfaction with your life, more time for yourself, your family, and your friends. So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, this is about income and productivity and entrepreneurship, well, it's also about fitness and it's about having time. The number one excuse I hear from people is that they're too busy or they don't have time to eat better, don't have time to work out. So if you can focus on the one thing, eliminate distractions and focus on what's important, you're going to have more than just time to work out. You're going to have time to do the important things with your friends, your family, and ultimately yourself. And the first quote that it starts with is, if you chase two rabbits, you will not catch either one, which is a Russian proverb. And I like to go off a iteration of that I just randomly came up with myself. And it was, the lion that chases two gazelles goes hungry. And it's just this whole concept that you can't divert your focus onto two things and expect to get the one thing done.
My favorite, or at least one of my favorites takeaways, one of the stories that's written in the book is the one about the two wolves. Do you remember that part where it's like there's two wolves inside you? You know, I'm gonna paraphrase, but like one is negative and it's saying, you know, all the reasons why you can't succeed, and one is positive and it's saying all the reasons you can succeed. And essentially it's like told in the lens of like an elder, I want to say like
Native American,
yeah, chief or something like that, is telling it to young boy or something like that. And the young boy says, well, which wolf is, the one that guides, the one that leads? And he goes, the one that you feed. So there's always going to be negativity. There's always going to be positivity. It's kind of like the glass half empty, half full. Whatever you look at and whatever you focus on, you're going to create more of in the world. And so that's a really good takeaway. And one of the stories I liked a lot.
Yeah. I feel like the line was something along the lines of what wolf grows.
Yeah.
It's the one that you feed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really is whatever you want to grow, feed. If you don't want something to grow, stop feeding it, choke it out. The thing that I liked about how this gets laid out, and again, a lot of the books we've covered previously do a good job of laying it out, but he lays out 3 specific sections. So you have the lies, you have what was the other ones? It was the lies, like spacing on it now. And then there was like at the end, it was the 4 thieves. Pulling it up right now. So yeah, the lies, the truth, and the extraordinary results. And for me, as I was going through this, the lies stood out to me because those are ultimately what block you. And that was something that I took away as one of the initial quotes. And it was basically, it was from Mark Twain. It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And a big theme in the work I've been doing with clients this last week is really just diving into the language and the identity and the beliefs. Because if you believe that you're not a morning person, it's going to be really hard to work out in the morning. But as soon as you become a mother or a dog parent, that is now a new identity that you have. Getting up in the morning is no issue. And it's just a belief and a flip and switch of identity. And so I'm excited. I want to dive into every single one of these lies. There's one specifically around willpower that stood out to me, but it's what you don't know, or it's not what, yeah, he says it's so funny and so weird. It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. I like to say outside of death, taxes, and gravity, very few things are 100% for certain.
Paul, do you have an example of some time that you had your paradigm shifted in that way where you felt very convicted about something, but changing your viewpoint on it changed a lot of things for you?
I would say just life in general. The first thing that comes to mind is I grew up in a very religious household, and what I believed was true was basically what this religion believed. And over my life, things have shifted. I've carried some things that serve me. I've let go of some things that don't serve me. But I think that right there is an example. When I was going through the different part around identity, just over the last week from the work that when we covered Atomic Habits to now, another one was when I was at Amazon, I had a belief that this was my ceiling. This was the best that I could do. And that was okay. I was going to get some equity. I had a decent job. I was going to get paid vacation. I would travel once a year. And I remember thinking that in my head, thinking, if it doesn't get any better, I can live with this. And now I want to go and punch that 26-year-old Paul in the face because there's so much more out there for life. And it really took me, and this was the work that I did with a life coach, meditating every single day, going through I am statements, going through yoga and teacher training and personal training, and basically relearning all these things that I thought were true, but they just weren't so, to paraphrase that Mark Twain quote. I think that was a really big one for me. The other one that really sticks out is the belief around like nutrition would be one, where I used to think that as soon as I ate food, if I worked it off, then that food wouldn't sit and rest as fat.
Yeah. I remember you telling that story on my podcast when you were on, like, maybe last year, that you were, at the gym, like after a night out, trying to burn off your food.
Yeah, exactly. That's always one that sticks out to me. We went out for happy hour at work, and I went to the gym at like 11 p.m. and rode the bike for an hour so that I wouldn't have that layer of fat come over me. And it's funny now to say that, knowing what I know now, but it's ultimately what I didn't know and what I did know or thought that I knew.
And not to go too off the rails, but you said I am statements. And so I'd be curious for you to kind of expand on what that means to you, because I have the same sort of thing that I've done before, but I'm curious how you would explain that to someone.
Yeah, I am is a really powerful way to really look at everything. I was doing this with a client yesterday, and we were going through her intake form and just calling out every single section that said, I am tired, or I am so bad at this, or I am loving these results. And whatever you put after I am is ultimately a belief or an identity that you have about yourself. And the way I like to think about it is that I am statement is really an energy and an emotion about yourself or about something. And if you look at the word emotion, I like to try and split the E off and call it E split motion. And then I fill in that E with energy in motion.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone has energy or an I am statement about themselves, that is, I am not a morning person, energy. And if you think of like a train coming that way of I am not a morning person, in order, if you look at like inertia and Thomas Newton or Sir Isaac Newton, whatever his name is, you need the exact opposite to slow it down. It actually needs to be stronger to get it going in the other direction. So what I'll do is if I have a I am statement that's coming up to me, I am not a salesperson. I have to come with a stronger energy of I am an amazing salesperson and I'm learning every single day. And really it's like that I am statement is what you play in your head, and it's what you start to believe about yourself, and then it starts to just seep into your subconscious. And what is crazy and super powerful is if you have an I am statement about yourself that is negative, you're going to start to make decisions based off of, oh, well, I'm not a morning person, so I'm going to sleep in, or I'm not good at presenting, so I'm not even going to try. Versus if you say, I am a morning person, you're going to start to make decisions of that person. And that's why I want to use the example of you might not be a morning person, but as soon as you get a dog, you are a morning person. That's a shift in identity. If you are celiac, you won't eat carbs, but it might have taken you years to get a handle on your snacking leading up to that point. If you're allergic to peanuts and you have a terrible peanut allergy, my cousin has a terrible peanut allergy. You might love peanut butter, but as soon as you realize that I am allergic to peanuts, you stop eating peanuts because it's now who you are. And that can be for better or for worse.
Yeah. It reminds me, where you're talking excuse me, at the beginning about a client who said, I am tired. I am this, I am that. I remember one time I heard, I think on some podcast, they were talking about how the English language, unlike a lot of other languages, doesn't have a form of I am currently in their language. So we have I am, we have I was, but we don't have an I am currently. And so it's interesting how, like, if someone were to say I am obese or I am fat, a lot of times in other countries, the way they were describing it on this podcast is someone might use the language of I am currently. And so that's a lot more freeing. But again, I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, but language is so important in the way that you view yourself and the way that you make decisions and the way that you just make day-to-day choices. And so I think that's an interesting point, to realize that the language that you use is really going to impact what you do so deeply. And to also realize that you're never, besides like a few innate characteristics, you're never always one thing.
Yeah. It's super fluid and it can change. And to bring it back around to the one thing, the 6 lies that if you can identify you're repeating these lies to yourself, then you can get behind them and change the story, change that train with something that is different. So the 6 lies would be everything matters equally, multitasking. So you'd say, oh, I am really good at multitasking. That's a story you tell yourself. I can guarantee you are not good at multitasking. There's a difference between doing something passively in your autonomic nervous system, pumping your heart, and you being able to go for a walk. That's totally different. Then there's the next one. You have to live a disciplined life, or people that are successful just have crazy amounts of discipline that you don't have. That's a lie. Willpower is on will call. So you can just turn it on and turn it off. That's a lie. And the last 2, the idea of work-life balance or a balanced life, that is a lie. We'll get into that one in a second. And then the one after that, big is bad. And this concept that if I go shoot for the stars, that's big, that's bad, that's scary, that's failure. That's ultimately something that you're putting on yourself as the suppressor that's making you play small. So let's dive into these one by one. But I wanted to make sure we just touched on those at a high level as we get into the podcast and dive in a little bit deeper. So back to everything mattering equally. What he dives into here in the book is Pareto's principle, 80-20, and then takes it to the nth degree. So if you have 10 things or 20 things You do the 80-20, you get down to 2 things. You do the 80-20 again, you get down to 1 thing. And so that's really the practice that you can do, is write out what you got to do for the day. If it's 10 things, figure out what 2 or 3 things are important, and then figure out, okay, what things are even more important beyond that.
Yeah. And for people who aren't aware, the heuristic of the 80-20 principle is essentially, it just says that 20% of the effort gets 80% of the result. And this essentially can be applied to anything. It's most obvious a lot of times in a workplace. 20% of the employees do 80% of the work. In diet and exercise, you could say that 20% of your decisions make up for 80% of the results. So maybe with nutrition, it's prioritizing whole nutrient dense food. And maybe with training, it's training in heavy compound weightlifting, stuff like that, that it's so important that it makes the rest of the stuff not negligible, but so much less of a focus. And so you can think about in your fitness, in your life, in your relationships, in anything, what is the 20% that's driving 80% of the results? And that's really what you have to focus in on to be successful.
Yeah. So I was doing the math in my head as you were talking, and I was listening. So my bad. I was multitasking. But if you're going to write down a list of 25 things, 20% of that would be 5 things. Write down that list of 5 things that are really important, and then get down to that 1 thing, which, to your point, if someone's struggling with nutrition, here's 25 tips to eat better. Here's 25 tips to eat cleaner. When you identify the area that you struggle with, and then you identify the linchpin within that, then that's going to unlock so many more results. So make it.
Yeah. It reminds me of how on the last Q&A podcast, we talked a little bit about meal timing. And I mean, can it matter? Maybe, but it's in the last like 1 to 5% of something that's going to get you results, as opposed to other things that are so much bigger and are so much more worth your time. So it points back to, I love that phrase, missing the forest for the trees, because missing the forest for the trees is kind of like missing the 80% for the 20%,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So the next lie is that multitasking piece. And one thing that I liked as I was reading through it, and there was a visual of it, but it drew a workflow. And tell me if this sounds familiar. You've got this big project or big task that you need to do. Maybe you need to send this big email out, and you get halfway through, and then you multitask with another email that comes in, or you're changing your music, and then 2 hours go by, and you're, oh my gosh, what happened? Then you get back and finish that email. When that email could have just been done and knocked out in 30 minutes. Instead, it takes 3 hours.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that it's kind of also counterintuitive, because you want to imagine that the smartest people and the most capable people are the people that can multitask the most or multitask the best. But really, it's kind of the antithesis of that, where the most successful and the smartest people, or the people who are seeing the best results in work and relationships in life, fitness, again, are the people that realize the importance of, I like to call it single tasking, just because it kind of paints a very stark picture of what you really want to do is the opposite of multitasking. It's single tasking. It's dialing in on one thing and doing that to completion before moving on to the next thing.
Yeah. And it reminds me of the quote from, I think, Stillness is the Key, but it's, who is so sure that tomorrow will come that they can forsake the present moment now. And it's, who is so talented that they can do 2 things at 100%. And it answers no one. And in the book, and even I feel like I was listening to this in another podcast or another angle, but whether it's, it was another book, it was Your Next 5 Moves, but he was talking about when he just focused on getting his finances in order and eliminated every other distraction. He said in the book, I went on a 17-month sex hiatus. He's like, I went celibate. I said, I won't have sex until I'm out of, he has like $70,000 in debt. And so he just made that his one focus. He partied, loved going to the club, loved women. And he was just saying, like, in business or in your finances, you got to have one main focus, get rid of distractions. He said, not 5 women that you're trying to court, not 5 guys that you're trying to date, one person, not 10 business side hustle projects that you're trying to focus on, one. And it's this concept of who is so gifted, and the answer is no one, but who is so gifted that they can give 100% of themselves to more than one thing. The math doesn't check out.
Yeah. And again, it speaks to why you and I put mindfulness as such a big focus in our conversations with, each other on the podcast, in our conversations with clients, because just the ability to be present and focus on one thing and not have your mind go in 100 different directions when you're trying to do a project at work or be with your family or exercise, just understanding that each moment is worth your attention and your focus makes everything so much easier. It makes everything so much more enjoyable. So that's why for me, I focus on mindfulness every day and the meditation and trying to make good choices. And there's just so much to be said there as far as having the right prioritization.
Yeah, totally. Client yesterday asked me what I do when I'm journaling, because she had just gotten the 5-minute journal.
Mm-hmm.
And I say every day I really try and put down the one thing, and the journal that I have is the next day daily planner or something like that. And it has priority actions, important actions, I'm lifting my coffee up off it, and then non-urgent actions. And it's just this practice of like, this is super important, this is kind of important, this is not important, and then I want to put a 1 next to the thing that is most important in the priority actions. So it is kind of that 80-20 principle. But that right there is a practice of mindfulness, because I could just open my computer, go answer the first email that I see that takes my attention, and 3 hours later I've done absolutely nothing.
Yeah. And then what was the next one of the lies, the third one?
You have to live a disciplined life, or basically that discipline is something that you need to always like force, and you just exude discipline all the time. And the chapter goes on to talk about discipline is really this little skill that you go and exercise when you need to knock out your one thing. And then somewhere in the chapter too, it talked about 66 days being the sweet spot to developing discipline and making it second habit or second nature, which I thought was interesting, because you'll sometimes hear 21 days, then you hear 66 days. And I think the big thing within that though is, if you're trying to build a habit or build a discipline, to bring the multitasking thing back into frame, you can't have 20 things that you're trying to do all at once to develop a habit. Really find one thing that you're going to nail it down, then move to the next one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you have an example of that for yourself?
Yeah, I would say you could go the lens of nutrition. If someone's trying to get in the habit of ordering out less, cooking more, making a smoothie, cooking specific recipes, really try and dedicate something to be like the season that you're really focused in. So for example, that would be like every morning you're going to get in the habit of making your morning green smoothie, where you've got some sort of protein powder, you got some sort of fruit or vegetable, and you've got your base. And that is your main focus. And that might not be the best focus for you. You got to understand what is your 80-20 and what do you need to focus on. It could be getting more fiber in. And that is something that is at 2:00 every single day, you go and have a thing of raspberries, an apple, right? But if you have 10 things each day where you're trying to check off this list, it's going to be so much harder than if you're just focusing like, this is the one thing that I got to make sure I do today. I got to drink 100 ounces of water. And once you get that into it as a habit, then go and try and focus on something else.
Yeah, I really like the example and the visual in the book where he talks about dominoes and compound interest, where if you just start knocking down a stack of dominoes, it's going to lead to one into another, and they can get bigger and bigger. And that just speaks to the importance of focusing on a single task at a time as well, because even when you choose to single task over multitasking, you think you might be getting less done. But every time you knock out one important thing, I think you make it easier to do subsequent tasks in the future, because you have more of an idea of like how to attain success. So for example, if you focus really hard on one product at work and get that done, you're probably going to be 5-10% more efficient than next time you do a different project at work, even though it's not related, because you found out what the keys are to success. And then on top of that, with single tasking over multitasking, you can get things done to completion and then completely leave those. And hopefully, if you are working on things sequentially, it's set you up in the right way that it's going to make further downstream effects easier. So like another fitness example is, if you can really figure out how to use and apply macros, that's going to make it that much easier to maybe focus on your strength gains, because you know what it takes to add some lean mass over time, and you have that nutrition piece dialed in. So that's going to make that training piece dialed in. And so with the one thing, so many times he just points back to, your focus should be narrow on one thing. And because these things are interconnected, it's going to make them all easier, like with that fitness example.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that geometric progression and just the visual that he gives with it, where the first domino is 2 inches tall. The 23rd domino is as tall as the Eiffel Tower, and the 57th is the distance from the Earth to the moon. And that just goes to show, I was picturing Sudoku in my head. Did you ever play that game? So you learn how to do one thing, and yes, you learn that. Now you got to go and learn the next thing. What is the number inside of that box? But it's now easier because you've already solved for 1, 2, 3, or 4 of those boxes. So when you look at to what you were talking about, getting habits that build off of each other, if you get macros in place and you're really good at that, that's going to clean up a lot of other issues that you might not have been able to clean up had you not identified like that one domino that knocked all of the other dominoes over. And actually, to that point, the fourth or the third one is willpower is on will call, but I don't want to come to biggest bad just because this ties into that. This was the 6th of the lie. And it is really that focus. If you go and choose a bigger domino to knock down, you're going to knock over so much more versus if you go and say, all right, my goal for the next 66 days is to eat an apple every single day. And like, that's not to say that apples are bad or that that's not a goal if you're trying to get more fruit in. But if you choose that as a goal, that's thinking small because you get that and that's a tiny domino that might unlock some other dominoes. But if you say, all right, my goal for 66 days is to track my macros, that's a bigger goal, but the trajectory you set yourself on and the dominoes you allow to knock out is ultimately so much bigger than that. And it's not to say don't start small and don't build up. That would take context in terms of like who you are and where you're at. But I think the biggest thing as coaches that we try and do is challenge people to think bigger and play bigger, because coming back to the idea and the lies that we tell ourselves, if you ask a bigger or better question, you'll get a bigger, better answer. Is something that I always like to remind myself.
Yeah, it's big. And I think that the thing that goes hand in hand with that he talks about in the book is big and specific. So an easy example for fitness is lots of people might have the goal that I want to lose weight. Well, that's not specific. And so that's not empowering. So it's going to make it very easy to day by day not make choices that are going to help you lose weight because you don't have a specific goal and vision in mind. Versus if you said, I want to get to X weight, or even better would be like, I want to get to X percent body fat, because then you can kind of control like keeping some muscle and trying to prioritize losing fat over muscle. But having a more definite goal, I want to get bigger and stronger. Okay, well, maybe a better goal would be I want to bench X, I want to deadlift X, stuff like that, where it's more tangible and specific. The more specific a goal is, the more likely you are to make actions towards it.
Yeah, definitely start getting into those SMART goals. The 5th one, I want to finish on willpowers on will call. The 5th one is a balanced life concept. And there's a quote in here that I loved. When you gamble with your time, you may be placing a bet that you can't cover. And so it's this belief that, oh, I can spend 4 hours a day on all of these different tasks. When in reality, you need to identify which one task deserves your 4 hours. And then it's this game of counterbalancing and really identifying, here's the season that I'm at in my life. We always talk about nutrition seasons or training seasons. If you're in a season of really focusing on your career and really trying to get that promotion, other things are going to lose focus, are going to lose priority. As soon as you go and get that promotion, then you set kind of like a stake in the ground and go and focus on something else that is now the priority that needs your attention. And all the while you've built these habits and you've built these things that keep these other areas of your life in maintenance. I like to think of career, mental health, physical health, and relationships as basically what you need to do to drive that stake into the ground. But this concept of balance, work-life balance, I think it's just one of the biggest lies ever. And it really isn't. The question shouldn't be, how can I have a balanced life? It should be, how can I be as present as possible when I have the opportunity with my friends, with my family, with my work? And that's where I get into the visual of a ton of bricks and a ton of feathers. A ton of bricks is like 600 bricks. A ton of feathers is almost 1 million feathers. They weigh the same. That's balanced, but there is a huge quantity on one side and a smaller quantity on the other side. But that small quantity is so potent.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it's just so interesting because it's so hard to put into practice, where you might think you're being effective if, you're focused on a million different things, but truly being effective is just dialing in on a few things and really getting serious and really committing to just doing a few things and not just being all over the place and being kind of like a hamster on a wheel, because that can make you feel effective. I think with the work-life balance, I like your question, but the way that I would phrase it and the way I like to think about it is not how can I have work-life balance, but how can I have work that's so enjoyable to me and that's so meaningful to me that I don't want to have balance, or balance is not a consideration for me because my work is giving me so much pleasure and joy and feels so purposeful that it's just not a consideration. Like I don't need a break from it because it's not, I mean, obviously work is always going to be difficult in some capacity, but you want to work on something that, I like the quote from Naval Ravikant where he says, work on something that looks like work to others, but looks like play to you. So you want to be so impassioned that you don't need that balance. You don't need that, oh God, this is so stressful and shitty, I have to take a break, I need to go do something else,
Yeah. And I want to come in as we talk about all these lies and focusing on the one thing with a different perspective. And this is actually something I saw on Gary Vaynerchuk's Instagram yesterday, but he was talking about having your one thing be happiness. And if you're doing multiple things and they all give you happiness, and that is what you are solving for, then you can have multiple instruments that you're playing, or you can have multiple projects that you're doing. And you're just talking about someone who should solve for a job that's more fulfilling or more enjoyable. Not everyone's going to have a job that is this so passionate. Maybe a lawyer is super passionate about law, but at the same time, they might have their job and have a good relationship with that framework. And then they have 2 or 3 other things that really optimize for happiness. So the balance of everything is health, is happiness, but it really is this identification of where you are on the spectrum. Maybe you are just so fragmented and you need to narrow things down. But then if you are super narrowed down, make sure that what you're optimizing for is actually the one thing that you want. I think that's why this is such an interesting discussion, because we can talk about focusing on the one thing, but if that one thing is building towards the one thing that you don't want 100%, you got to realign to what is like the number one thing that I want out of my life, out of my career, out of my health.
Yeah. And it's not to say that I don't mean to project and say that everyone should treat work as their number one priority or should have something that they're working really hard on, but maybe work isn't your priority. Maybe it's a way that you make money, and that's important because it allows you to focus on your family and allows it to focus on your hobbies. And those are more important to you. So getting clear on, I guess another key point here would be, don't just work hard and be very invested in your work because you feel like it's what you should do, because that's what people around you do. Really get clear on your priorities and what's going to be high impact for you. I was thinking after I was talking about the being passionate about work, it's another really good fitness example where don't try to do something fitness wise to stay in shape or to get in shape that you just hate and that you dread going to. So if CrossFit just sounds miserable, well, don't try to go to CrossFit classes 4 or 5 days a week. If you hate lifting weights or you hate running, then try to prioritize more of the opposite. Do stuff that's going to make you feel enjoyable, that's going to be enjoyable, and that's going to get you excited to go and work out. And maybe that's the aspect of improvement. Maybe that's the aspect of feeling good after a workout and something that's a little bit more high intensity and metabolic at the end. Find out what you like and what gets you excited to go to the gym and capitalize on making that a big part of your routine.
Yeah, and that's really good. I'm glad you came in with that perspective and that anecdote, because I think that's a really good thing to apply from fitness, from everything that we're talking about. At the beginning, I mentioned this is very much productivity and work and income and all of these, but it has so many parallels with fitness. And at the end of the day, we're just trying to live a happier, healthier life with more time for ourselves.
Yeah. So, it's like, again, back to those things we talked about in the last Q&A. Sometimes people want to ask a question along the lines of, well, what should I do to reach my goals? Should I do powerlifting? Should I do bodybuilding? Should I do Pilates? Should I run marathons? It's like, first and foremost, what do you enjoy? Because that's going to be the number one, that's going to be the base of the pyramid. That's going to be the most important part of the hierarchy, is what do you enjoy? Because that's going to make consistency and adherence so much easier, which is, I would say that those two things, consistency / sustainability, and enjoyment are the biggest considerations for me when I'm coaching someone on what sort of workouts to do. And of course, there's things that I think are somewhat non-negotiable, like everyone should have something that they do that's based around strength training, just because of the importance of adding muscle mass and all the benefits of that, like we've talked about. But there is a ton of flexibility too, to do what you like to do and what's enjoyable for you.
Yeah, totally. You got to make sure you can pay your bills, and then go
Exactly.
have fun
Great
beyond
example.
that.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that you can get up off the couch without your
Mm-hmm.
knees shattering. Outside of that, go and do what is fun. I feel like we could talk about this one all day, but I want to finish up this last lie. And it is that willpower is on will call. And there's a really fun study on page 68, and I just want to read it. So it was where do I want to start with this one? Researchers Jonathan Levov of the Stanford School of Business in California, along with Leora Avanim Peso, sorry for butchering these, and Shai Danzinger of Ben Gurion University of Negev, found a way to create and investigate this idea of willpower. So they took a hard look at the impact of willpower on the Israeli parole system. And this just goes to show when you are tired or when you are fatigued, your willpower is completely eviscerated. So researchers analyzed 1,112 parole board hearings assigned to 8 judges over a 10-month period, which is incidentally amounted to 40% of Israel's total parole requests over that period. So the pace is grueling. The judges hear arguments and take about 6 minutes to render a decision on 14 to 35 parole requests a day. They get only 2 breaks, a morning snack and a late lunch, to rest and refuel. The impact of their schedule is as spectacular as it is surprising. In the mornings after each break, parolees' chance from being released peak at 65% and then plunge to near zero by the end of the period. And so what it was showing is that these breaks, the morning break, the afternoon break, and the end of day, these judges were so tired from making decisions that the parolees were not getting off parole more than 1 or 2% of the time. But if you caught someone at the end of a break and a recovery, it jumped up to near 60, 68%. And so my question for you, the listener, what are you trying to do and create and focus on in your life, but you're doing so when your willpower is the lowest? I always say biology beats willpower over an extended time frame every single time. So if you can optimize the harder decisions for yourself when willpower is highest, you're going to be so much more successful.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think it just speaks to, again, we talk about the importance of working hard, but just as important is giving yourself recovery and giving yourself time to relax and recharge and just do nothing, which I know if you're like me, if you listen to this podcast, you're probably someone who's focused on productivity and is trying to be successful. And so sometimes it's hard to give yourself a break and to just relax and recharge, but that's just as important to be highly successful as focused, intensive work is.
Yeah. And think of your computer, think of your phone. We've all had our phone at 10%, or maybe we have our iPhone or whatever phone that is the 6th or 7th removed generation from whatever the newest one is. And we're swearing at Apple and saying, oh, this phone sucks. They sandbag all of the good stuff for the whatever the newest phone. But when those phones get to 10, 15%, they suck. And if you think that you're doing anything good, or you're going to be super disciplined or have a ton of willpower on 10 to 15% because you haven't rested or haven't slowed down, I got news for you. You're going to suck. And it's not that you suck, but it's just a fact of life that when willpower gets lowest, you're going to fall. And this comes back to that quote from Atomic Habits. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And so iterative off of that is you're going to fall to the level of your willpower. And if your willpower is low, your default systems are going to start to creep in, and then you're going to start to get more of what you're trying to escape from.
Yeah, which I think leads to one of the favorite quotes that I wrote down to mention is, it's not that we have too little time to do all the things we need to do. It's that we feel the need to do too many things in the time we have. So again, it just speaks to really narrow down and focus on what's important. You can't do a million things because that's going to completely drain your energy, and you're not going to be effective at, again, bringing it back to the beginning, that 20% that really is driving the results that you're looking for. I think another important note that I really stopped and thought a lot about in the book is the concept of benchmarking too. Just stopping every once in a while and saying, where am I? Am I still on course for my goals? Because sometimes we can get so narrowly focused and we can have our blinders on that we don't realize that we're working really hard towards something that's not really important to us anymore. So as you grow and change, priorities grow and change. And so taking time to step back and just make sure you're on the right course is important too.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love about meditation and journaling. It works as a self-auditing system if you've got reflection exercises built into that. And that's ultimately what keeps you back on track, like bumpers of a bowling lane. I'm not really good at bowling, and I try not to do it with bumpers because it's embarrassing. But if you want to hit the pins and you've got bumpers, you're going to be so much more successful, but you can veer off track. And so having a journal practice, having a meditation practice, having a coach allows you to do that self-audit. If you only audit yourself once a year as like a business or your taxes, you can run into a lot of problems. If you're doing that every single week, every single day, every single month, whenever, you're going to be able to catch those sooner and get back on track.
Yep. Do you have any quotes that you wanted to mention? Any favorites that stick out?
I've read through a few. The couple that I wrote down that I haven't mentioned: efficiency is doing the right thing, effectiveness, or no, efficiency is doing the thing right, effectiveness is doing the right thing. That really stood out to me because you could think to yourself all day, oh, I'm so efficient. And you might be efficient at watching TV or doing something that's not effective. I was trying to think of something that's a little bit more specific at work. You might be efficient at making really pretty cells on your Excel spreadsheet, but at the end of the day, like the effectiveness is getting the work done, not having it look so pretty. There was another one. There can only be one most important thing. Many things may be important, but only one thing can be the most important, by Ross Garber. And I think that really brings me back to whatever we try and do with clients is understand, all right, on the triangle of goals, what is your goal? Is it an aesthetic goal? Is it a performance goal? Is it a longevity goal? Within that, is your aesthetics goal building muscle? Is it losing fat? Is it building bigger biceps? And that is the one thing that we are optimizing for, or is it performance? And performance can be all over the board. Is it your golf swing? Is it, and we don't work on golf swings. That's just an example because my golf swing's terrible and I shot 104. Is it running a marathon? Is it squatting a certain amount of weight? Because we want to make that a one thing that we are optimizing everything else for. And if you think you're going to increase your squat while you run a marathon, while you lose a ton of fat, while you're focusing on getting better sleep, good luck. You bet that this is never going to happen in a million years unless you are a 1% of a 1% of an alien mutant that has just crazy genetics. And if you're listening to this, what's up? I'd love to meet you, but you probably aren't because you're off doing crazy mutant things.
Yeah. And understand that your one thing can change and your one thing kind of scales up and down too. If your one thing for your life is to live happily and healthily, but one year that is improving your running time, and then the next year it's improving your bench press, just for example, for the fitness, your one thing can scale and change. And it's obviously different on different time scales. So keep that in mind too. It is as malleable and flexible as it is strict, kind of depending on, I guess, how far you zoom out, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, so many good things in this book. We're coming up on 8:00 real time as we do this, and so I want to just wrap it up. There's one little section that I thought was helpful, and it was just the four thieves at the end. And so it's the inability to say no, the fear of chaos, poor health. So shout out to health and fitness and nutrition. This book, even though it is not related to that, it touches on, you need those to be optimized for everything. And then an environment that doesn't support your goals. And so you can have everything dialed in, super intentional to focus on your one thing. But if you don't have the ability to say no, you hate chaos or things being crazy, your health's in poor shape, and your environment doesn't support your goals, well, you got something else to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think we covered a lot of good stuff here, and I hope that this has encouraged people to check out the one thing if you haven't yet.
Yeah, definitely check out the one thing. And speaking of one thing, we've got one thing that we've been working on that I'm super excited to talk about. And so we're going to talk about the Mindful Muscle 30-day challenge. It's going to start April 11th, and the link's going to be in the show description. You can learn a little bit more either on my Instagram, Jake's Instagram, or going to the Mindful Muscle Facebook group. But one of the things we're doing for people, so if you enroll early, you're going to save $100 and literally only pay $7 for this challenge. In the past, I've done this challenge for up to $500. I've actually added more things into it, but I want this to be super accessible. And this is going to be different from your typical 30-day challenge where it's how much weight can you lose? How unsustainable workout practices? It's not like that at all. It is a 30-day fitness challenge that focuses on short or on long-term results. And what we're going to utilize is the unique identity setting method that we touched on in the last podcast on the atomic habits. That's going to put healthy habits on autopilot. So this is really about ingraining healthy habits and doing so in a mindful way as you get stronger. And so when we look at what's going to be included, as I said, I've done this challenge before. I'm throwing the kitchen sink at this. And the $7 is really just to make sure that we cover our software expenses as we bring on people into this. So who is this for? How much does it cost? What comes with the program? When does the program start? All of that's going to be on the main page, but I want to just go with what comes with the program. So you'll get a month of expert designed workouts delivered through the E4Fit app. You'll get access to the Mindful Muscle mini course. We're completely revamping that with trainings like the identity setting method, nutrition tips, the macro manual, ways to improve your metabolism, different mindfulness techniques as well. You're going to get 6 recipe books with shopping lists and meal templates, private support and accountability group in the Facebook community, plus bonus programs, the functional flow, yoga for runners, hit it home, and core crushers. And then we're also going to do a book review of Atomic Habits, and we'll identify atomic fitness habits and kind of do it through a fun fitness angle. And so again, this is everything that I can include in a program for just $7. And so the link to sign up for that is going to be in the description below the show. It's going to be what we talk about for the next 2-3 weeks. And you can find those on our social media, link in description, in the Mindful Muscle Facebook group, and would encourage you to join, because if you want to get a lifestyle foundation change and not just quick fix, not just workouts that have no direction, this is the ultimate thing to do.
Yeah, take advantage, guys. This is something not to miss out on. Ton of value. It's something that we won't offer very often, so we're really excited to do this.
Yeah, absolutely. As a reminder, if you are looking to get food done for you, super simple, super easy, you got Fuller NutriFuel. That's going to be something that might even see if we can get that looped into the challenge as well. But 15% off your first order if you use Paul15. You get food delivered to your door fresh, saves you time, saves you money. Every single client that I have that uses it says it's an absolute game changer. So if you're not using it, go use it. That link is also going to be in the description below to take advantage of it. Make sure you use Paul15 on your first order, Paul10 on subsequent orders after that. Jake, I think that's all I got. You got any last words?
No, thank you guys for listening. As always, reach out if you have any questions, any book recommendations that you'd want us to do on the podcast, and be sure to look out for the 8-week Mindful Muscle Challenge coming up here.
30 day.
30 day, yes.
30 day. We were talking about 8 week, but we're going to do 30 days. So thank you guys so much for listening to the Mindful Muscle podcast. We'll catch you on the next Q&A, and we'll see you later.
Bye, guys.